Charles P. Pierce is taking on Bill Kristol. Let me give you a little background here. First of all, Rand Paul has decided to throw his father overboard. Ron Paul came out on the issue of Russia, the Ukraine, and the U.S. Ron Paul came out and said, you know, why do we care about the Ukraine? Or why do we care about Crimea? It's got nothing to do with us. It's not in our security interest. The closest thing we've got is Chevron cut an oil deal with them. What's the big deal here? But Rand Paul, who's running for president, has decided, if you're running for president, you got to wave the flag around and call for big military and that kind of thing. So he says, and I quote, "The United States should make it abundantly clear to Russia that we expect them to honor the December 1944 Budapest Memorandum in which the U.S., Russia, and the United Kingdom reaffirmed their commitment to respect the independence and sovereignty of the existing borders of Ukraine." Now, as the American Thinker points out, and this is over at the economicpolicyjournal.com, as the American Thinker points out, interesting that both sides have apparently violated the agreement already, which in diplomacy usually means the agreement's no longer in effect. And they go on to add, the U.S. has obviously been meddling in the affairs of Ukraine, and it's simply outrageous to think that we should play any role in the affairs of Ukraine. Ukraine is 5,000 miles away from the U.S., no military threat or any other threat to the U.S., and it sits on the border of Russia. For absolutely no good reason, the U.S. is provoking the Russian bear. So that's the backstory. And then Bill Kristol came along and wrote this in the Weekly Standard. He says, so, will Obama now move beyond affirmations to actions? Will Obama expedite the admission of Georgia to NATO and begin to move toward a security relationship with Ukraine? Now, can you imagine? I mean, how we would respond if Russia cut a deal with Cuba and started putting missiles there? Oh, yeah, that's right. We already did respond to that. Anyhow, back to Bill Kristol. Will Obama canvass his administration to discover the many other things that could be done to begin to undermine Putin at home and abroad? So Charles, this is Bill Kristol, the happy neocon, the guy who talked us into Afghanistan and Iraq. He's just always happy to shed somebody else's blood with a big smile. And they love to put him on television because he smiles so nicely. So Charles P. Pierce, gives a response over in Esquire magazine and their blogs at esquire.com, gives a response to Bill Kristol. He says, "You monstrous, bloodthirsty fraud, you stupid, silly, chicken hawk mother who plays army man with the children of people who are so much better than you and who would feed innocent civilian in lands you will never visit into your own personal meat grinder to service your semi-annual martial erection. You and the rest of your cowardly cohort helped prepare the ground for the worst geopolitical mistake this country has made in 30 years. You fought the battle of the green rooms and the think tanks, while other people's sons and daughters died for your fantasy of how the world would work if you really were the pimply adolescent Zeus you see when you look in the mirror every morning. The country does not need your lectures anymore, Bill Kristol. The country does not need your counsel. The country does not need your advice. And as sure as human beings have become dead because of your lectures, Bill Kristol, your counsel and advice, human beings about whom you otherwise care nothing, the country does not need your hectoring that it has become insufficiently bellicose to fulfill your newest blood-drenched fantasies. Even here, even now, you hide behind the skirts of a woman from Indiana who, while I believe her to be wrong, seems to be genuine in her beliefs. You are unworthy of her intellectual camouflage. You should be driven from polite society, consigned to an ideological Molokai so that you can no longer infect the rest of us. People should shun you. You should wear the bell for the rest of your miserable days. Amen. Jim, do you have George rendered? Let me play you, this is George Galloway, who's been a guest on this program a number of times, a Scottish member of the British Parliament, speaking before the United States Congress about the last war that Bill Kristol helped talk us into. He's speaking to members of Congress who voted to invade Iraq.
And I told the world that your case for the war was a pack of lies. I told the world that Iraq, contrary to your claims, did not have weapons of mass destruction. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to Al-Qaeda. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to the atrocity on 9/11/2001. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that the Iraqi people would resist a British and American invasion of their country, and that the fall of Baghdad would not be the beginning of the end, but merely the end of the beginning. Senator, in everything I said about Iraq, I turned out to be right, and you turned out to be wrong. And 100,000 people have paid with their lives. 1,600 of them American soldiers sent to their deaths on a pack of lies. 15,000 of them wounded, many of them disabled forever on a pack of lies. If the world had listened to Kofi Annan, whose dismissal you demanded, if the world had listened to President Chirac, who you want to paint as some kind of corrupt traitor, if the world had listened to me and the anti-war movement in Britain, we would not be in the disaster that we're in today.
George Galloway, British Member of Parliament. He may be a former Member of Parliament. I'm not sure if he ran for re-election last time around. But he's been on this program a number of times, back in the day, back in 2003, 4, 5, 6. Charles Pierce headlined his little speech to Bill Kristol. Just in from our sociopath bureau. Just shut up and go away. All right. It's just astounding to me. So we've got that on the international front. Then on the domestic front, Ralph Reed. This is on MSNBC's Morning Joe, right? MSNBC, the network owned by Comcast, a very, very conservative family owns Comcast. You will never hear a conversation on MSNBC about net neutrality because Comcast is trying to undo that. And actually has, succeeded. You will never hear a conversation about media consolidation because they're consolidating media. You will never hear a conversation about the real issues that are tearing apart this country, tragically. Ralph Reed, sitting here with Mika Brzezinski, basically says, rather than giving women food stamps, why don't we just make divorce harder? So their husbands have to stick around and give them money. Why should we pay for the food stamps for divorced women, for single mothers? Yeah, it's a nice talking point for the billionaire class, the Rand Paul class, the hereditary aristocracy class, the oligarch class. He says, I personally think the no-fault divorce revolution in the 60s and 70s has not been good for society. At what point are we going to start to say to people like Ralph Reed and Bill Kristol and Rand Paul and these other buffoons and George W. Bush and Condi Rice and Dick Cheney, you guys are war criminals, you are wrong, you are sick.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you are harming this country. You are distorting this country. You are destroying this country.